All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How are we doing today?
Good, so how are you?
I can't complain too much. I could, but no one would listen. So, how are we feeling? How are we doing? Are we managing okay?
Overwhelmed.
I understand. I understand. It's a tough time of the semester, and it's especially tough because with everyone um, with everyone trying to run an assessment sort of simultaneously, it's very difficult. Um, so, um, do, 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 do. Right. So, how do you guys feel about the occupier's liability material? Does this feel like it's sort of going okay for you guys, or how do we feel?
For me, I think it's manageable because the textbook kind of gives a really good outline for me to come to lectures with. So I feel like it's okay. Most of the material in taught is kind of okay. So
From your lips to God's ears. So, all right. Anybody else? Is there anything that's still confusing about it?
So for me, I've just only managed the worksheet so far, so I can't focus more on revision or trying.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's fine. You guys know how to reach me when you have questions. All right. So, um, let's talk about today's activity. Um, this is, it's been posted on e-learning. And the key piece of this, right, there's a little more to it on the e-learning, but the key piece is to write a fact pattern that in your mind would fail each of the three questions in the remoteness analysis. Okay, so this is a boundary drawing exercise. This is an exercise that is about reaching the limits of a doctrine. Okay, so some folks have had an opportunity to do this sort of before the tutorial. A lot of folks have not. So do you guys need a few minutes to get yourselves sorted?
yeah, so I thought this tutorial was gonna be mostly questions. So I guess my bad. I didn't know that we had work prepared for us
Yeah,
to do.
no, that last week was the revision tutorial.
Okay,
Yeah.
my bad.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's not a big deal, but this is intended to give you guys a grip, a chance to play around with remoteness. Okay, so since it seems like some of you guys would appreciate a few minutes, I'm going to shut up, let you have that time. I will still be here, so just ping me if you need anything, and I will come back. But I'm going to mute myself. Okay, so let's reconvene. And at this point, I think the next step is the pair portion of, I think, pair share. So we're going to head into breakout rooms. I love it. I say the word breakout rooms, and like magic, somebody drops off every time. Every time. It's really weird how there's always someone who has technical issues right at that moment. Um, so, uh, um, So we're going to step out into these breakout rooms. And again, remember that this is about an opportunity to improve one another's thinking. So you should be asking the question, you know, it's not just sort of getting the fact pattern from your classmate, but you need to be asking the question, how does this fail the remoteness test, right? How does this fail each step of the remoteness test? And then when we reconvene, that'll be an opportunity for you to to present your classmates' work. Okay, so let me create these. Okay, and then open them up. So please head on in. One of the groups is 3, the other are 2. The others are 2. Derrick, are we having problems? Is everything okay? Okay, so I really appreciate the work that you guys did in the breakout rooms. I know that, you know, things had to get scrambled there at one point, and I appreciate the flexibility. So as per usual, we're going to start with volunteers. So who would like to present their group partners' fact pattern? Go ahead, Rhea.
Hi. So my group members' fact pattern goes like this.
Whose fact pattern are you presenting? That's the first.
Miss Brathwaite, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. So there was a man out one night partying, and he was smoking a cigarette. He felt really tired after this party, so he threw himself on the plot of grass or land in front of the party house that he was at. And instead of outing the cigarette, before he fell asleep, it was still lit and the grass reasonably caught on fire, which he was lying on, and it burned the entire front lawn of the person's property. And yeah, that's that pattern. And in the tutorial, we asked the 3 questions to see if this worked out. And the first one is whether the external factors which cause the damage a reasonable foreseeable source of danger. We said yes, because a cigarette that is obviously lit would cause grass to catch on fire if you don't out it. Secondly, it says, if so, was it reasonably foreseeable how these external agencies would cause the damage? Yes, embers from fire would, reasonably cause grass to burn. And thirdly, was the type of damage caused reasonably foreseeable? Yes, if you are tired and you threw yourself on somebody's property, it's obvious that not outing the cigarette would have caused this to occur. And that's what we have.
Yeah, so I think that you're correct in all your particulars. The issue that I run into is that the call of the question asks you to write a fact pattern that fails the remoteness analysis. So you've sort of, what you've done is correct, right? You have correctly analyzed the fact pattern that you wrote, but it is not responsive to the call of the question.
Okay, now I'm confused.
So the question, let me put the question in the chat. So the question that you were tasked with was to write a fact pattern that in your mind would fail each of the 3 questions in the remoteness analysis. And so the question becomes, right, we're looking for a story where the source of danger isn't reasonably foreseeable.
Okay, so we actually discussed it. We had that issue where I thought, well, I thought it was this way, the way that you're explaining it, and then we just had a little misinterpretation. My bad. Sorry.
It happens. It happens. I'm not. This is why we do these kinds of questions, so that you can learn, so that when you read them, you know what you are looking at. Winston, your hand has been raised. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. My associate, Cassie Ann James, posed a situation where an elderly person was under the supervision of a caretaker, and one of the morbidities she had, a condition, was that she could get heat strokes easily.
Mhm.
And they had treatments for it. However, in this situation, one night the electricity came off, the power was cut, and even though the caretaker was trying to do everything she could because of the medicine, it helped the patient sleep, right? So the patient was just sleeping throughout the entire thing, and she couldn't get her. She was kind of unresponsive. So when the power cut, she ended up being, well, she died because of a heat stroke.
Mhm. So this is raising some interesting questions related to like the egg skull plaintiff rule. So explain to me how this fails the remoteness analysis questions. Can you do that for me?
So, well, the first question was, were the external factors which cause the damage a reasonably foreseeable source of danger?
Mhm.
I think in the Caribbean context, it's kind of normal that people always have power outages, and that is not the foreseeable risk of that.
Okay, that makes sense, right? That power outages are a thing that happens, and that we don't really necessarily think of that as being a deadly danger, because the heat in the Caribbean, it's something that we've adapted to, or that y'all have adapted to, and that, God willing, I will adapt to soon enough. uh, um, the second question, right, is the manner of harm one that is reasonably foreseeable? So if we assume that the source of danger is reasonably foreseeable, then is the manner of harm reasonably foreseeable?
Well, I think even the caretaker was doing everything that they could. Like they would have had a ventilation system set up just in case, but however, the power outage.
Yeah. So I think that, if we grant that the source of danger is reasonably foreseeable, this isn't a story that is really unbelievable, right? So this is the daftness test that we keep talking about, the manner of harm, and that strikes me as being sort of, this is a relatively foreseeable story. Now, I think that one thing that you might be able to do is you might be able to say that instead of it being a power outage that causes the death, what if our plaintiff was extremely sensitive to heat, and in fact, what caused the damage, what caused their death was being having their hair done and being blown on with a hair dryer. And the hot air from the hair dryer was enough to cause damage. Would that be a reasonably foreseeable source of danger?
No.
Maybe not, right? Would that be a manner of harm that is reasonably foreseeable? Maybe not. The third step of the analysis is always the trickiest in this problem, right? Across the board for everyone, even when I was sort of put on the spot earlier today and asked to offer up an example, I offered one up. When I walked through the analysis, we figured out that the third step, that I had passed it, and so I had to alter it to fail that third step. So, so our hairdryer murder weapon passes fails the first two steps of the remoteness analysis, so it meets the call of the question. On the third one, it's trickier, right? So Derrick asks, is that the egg skull plaintiff rule? Absolutely right. This is one of those situations where the egg skull plaintiff rule is an exception to the normal remoteness analysis, right? So this would fail the normal remoteness analysis, but the egg skull plaintiff rule brings it back in. Okay, does that make sense, Derrick?
Yes, sir.
Great, awesome. Okay, so who would like to go next? This is likely to be the last one that we'll have a chance to go over today.
Dr. Krell?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm not too sure if we were able to satisfy the outcome of the exercise, but we were deliberating another scenario that was presented by Derrick. He would have indicated that, let us say, a utility crew was changing a pole or installing a pole for a power line at a remote location. They had gotten halfway through. They had temporarily secured the pole in the ground and had gone to lunch or gone on a break, and a car ran into the pole and hit the pole onto a house that was nearby. So within that context, we were trying to create the ideal scenario where we would satisfy all three, but we didn't get there.
And it's hard, right? This is hard. I don't want you to think that this is like that there's something wrong with you guys if this is puzzling for you. Okay, this is a hard exercise, so I appreciate the work here. I meant it when I said this is a boundary drawing puzzle, right? It's about finding the limits of the doctrine, which means that the stories are going to seem extreme, right?
Sir?
Yes, go ahead.
We'd like to add a little bit more to that. The driver of the car had taken some medication which had never affected them in this way before, but they fell asleep, and that is why the car hit the pole. And additionally, as Cassie Ann said, the remote location was quite a bit off the road, and because they fell asleep, they rolled down all this way and hit the pole and actually hit the house.
Okay, so let's run through the questions, right? Is the source of danger reasonably foreseeable? Okay, why do you say that it is not reasonably foreseeable? What is the source of danger that you're identifying?
Will that be me?
Yeah, you're the one that answered, so
I don't know if you got
you have been volunteered.
Sorry. So the car coming off onto a very off-road, like, why would you expect that? I mean, it's I think that's reasonable to not see that a car would come into a very estranged remote location.
So I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I think
Or
that
hit the pole.
we're approaching the definition of what is the source of harm differently. For me, the source of harm is the object itself. So the question is a 1,000-kilogram moving block of metal and plastic traveling at 60, 80, 100 kilometers per hour, is that a reasonable source of danger?
And I still think the answer is no, because considering all the other factors, I don't know.
I mean, my question is, are all the other factors appropriate for consideration at this stage of the question? You see now why this is more difficult than it may first appear?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. If we're just focused on what is the object, well, most things that cause harm can be foreseen to have caused harm, right? Coming up with something that we can literally cause harm in an unforeseen way or be unforeseeable as a source of harm, that's remarkably difficult.
Okay, so I understand.
Yeah. I agree with you that if we approach the question subjectively and we ask, given the sum total of the circumstances, is it reasonable to foresee that a car would come, off the road and drive a couple of miles across a field to hit a utility pole? I agree that if we frame the question that way, that maybe the source of danger is not reasonably foreseeable. Okay. But I'm not convinced that that's how the authorities frame the question. I think they frame the question through the lens of the object itself. Okay. So, this exchange between Derrick and Rhea in the chat, right? Derrick asks, is the pole the cause of harm? Rhea asks, but the reason why it fell was because of the car. Derrick says, yes, which was not foreseeable that the guy would be asleep. So this goes to the second question in the remoteness analysis. Is the manner of harm reasonably foreseeable? Okay, that's the next piece of the puzzle. And I think that this is a pretty good example of a story where the manner of harm is not really reasonably foreseeable, right? This is a little bit of a Rube Goldberg machine type of tort. And I think that you have a sound argument here that there's so many moving parts, so many things that had to happen just right, that maybe a reasonable person doesn't foresee this manner of harm. Right? So I think that's this piece of the puzzle we're here on. On the type of harm, right? Is the type of harm reasonably foreseeable? Remember that this is a question about headings of damage. So damage to person, damage to properties, economic loss. So if you phrase this as an economic loss case, so if the damage is not the homeowner suing the driver for knocking over the utility pole. Let's say that the damage in question is the utility pole has filed a lawsuit for all of the billing that they could not accomplish because of the fact that they weren't able to extend service because the pole got knocked down. Okay, that would be a pure economic loss. Would that be a type of harm that is foreseeable from driving into an object? No. Right? So this is, so I like this example because I think it gives us some useful leverage on how the questions work, how the remoteness analysis works, even if it doesn't quite meet the call of the assignment, right? So that's okay, because this is a learning process. All right. So we are almost out of time. So what questions do you guys have about today's activity?
So I would like if you give us an ideal answer for what you've asked us.
Well, ideal is not really possible, but here is my answer. Okay, we have our plaintiff, Penelope plaintiff, who is attending a function and is served a cucumber sandwich at a tea party, and she eats the cucumber sandwich. A seed from one of the cucumbers lodges in her esophagus and then sprouts. And over the course of several weeks, her airway is blocked by this cucumber plant that is in her esophagus. The doctors are baffled. This is not something that ever occurred to them to look at, and so she passes away, and her estate sues the physician because wait for it, when she died and the power was cut off at her apartment, her computer, which was calculating a Bitcoin function, was turned off. And so she would have mined a new Bitcoin and been the owner of a new Bitcoin had the power not been turned off. And the power was turned off because she died. So the estate sues her physician, who was unquestionably negligent, right? Failed to discover the cause of her distress and therefore caused her death. Sued the physician for the value of the new Bitcoin.
So thank you. That is one crazy creative scenario.
So walking through the analysis, right? Is the source of danger reasonably foreseeable? It seems unlikely that a cucumber sandwich would present a hazard, right? Maybe you can make an argument that the specific hazard of choking is within the scope of reasonably foreseeable, right? But beyond that, I think this is a fairly good candidate for failing step one. Step two, does this story sound daft? Based on your reactions, it absolutely does, right? Step three, is the type of harm one that is reasonably foreseeable? No, this is a pure economic loss, and medical negligence simply does not lead to those kinds of losses, okay? Not foreseeably. All right, so with that, we are out of time. Derrick asks, what if the cucumber seed hit someone in the eye and they needed surgery, right? That's another approach to take. You know, you might fail the first step, second step, I think, maybe a little less far-fetched. But certainly the third step you would pass, right? Because the harm, whatever harm a cucumber would cause, would likely be harm to the person. Okay, and harm to your eye is absolutely going to qualify as harm to the person. All right. What other questions do you guys have before we wrap this up? Okay, so I have a private question. Once the thin skull rule comes back into the scenario when dealing with remoteness, then does this mean that the remoteness analysis was satisfied? So there's a couple of pieces here. The first one is that the thin skull rule is an exception to remoteness, right? So these are cases where you would fail the traditional remoteness analysis, but because of the plaintiff's thin skull condition, we allow the claim to go forward. Okay. So I guess the short answer to this is no, the traditional remoteness analysis would not be satisfied. That's why the thin skull rule comes into play. However, if the thin skull rule is met, then we allow the claim to go forward despite failing the traditional remoteness analysis. So does that answer the question? Person who sent me that? Great, okay. Derrick, you've been off mute. Did you have a question?
Yes, sir. I think that generally speaking, I think we have an idea. Honestly, sir, I think when you say that it didn't meet the criteria for the question, I wasn't sure because I thought it did in terms of the 3 points that were in Dworkin's article. I thought it had, but sir, I think obviously there's still a little bit of learning still to be done.
Let me be clear, right? So this relates to the very first scenario that we discussed, right? It passed the remoteness analysis, but the call of the question was to fail the remoteness analysis, right? And Ray says, I think it could have been argued. I think that those kinds of arguments are exactly what you need to be able to do, right? There will come a point in your legal career where you have to stand up, make an argument that you do not believe in and that you think the judges should not buy. And you have to stand up and you have to sell it to the best of your ability, okay? Because it's an argument that can be made in good faith and that serves the client's interests. And those are the standards, right? You don't have to find the argument convincing in order to make it. You just have to be able to look at it and go, yep, this is a good faith argument. Okay. So I think you're absolutely right that it could have been argued. I don't think it's a winning argument, but I think it could have been argued. Okay. Any other questions? Last chance. Going once. Going twice. All right. Then I will let you guys go. I will see you next week. So take care and bye.